what, when new data shows up that changes your old data, you shouldn't get mad about that. You should celebrate it.
Exactly. Well, also you have to look at all data. Like I don't want to get into this, but like if you have academics who are legitimate scientists and have published papers who are telling you that a man can be a woman, and which is fine in terms of like who you are. But now when you're having them compete with women in sports, you've entered into nonsense land, and you're the person we're counting on to be the most intelligent person on the subject. You're trapped by an ideology that you're now ignoring biology in favor of sociology.
I just wish we could get philosophy. We separate philosophical perspectives from science. We're fight about all the time. It's like once we got the scientists, and once we got the money, and once we proved that we are the most advanced, synthetic biology company in the world, once In-Q-Tel, which is the funding arm of the CIA and other governments, started investing in Colossal because of our technologies, and once we started proof points, the last arguments that we have against some of those scientists are philosophical ones, right? They're like, it's not a mammoth.
Right.
It's not a direwolf. And it's like this concept of speciation is a human construct that we are trying to impose on nature that flows more like a river than a rock. And
so are they saying that it's not because it didn't come straight from nature? It's something that you've recreated by piecing this together with that? Like, what are the genes that you had to use to create a direwolf? We didn't totally explain this.
Yeah.
So you have CRISPR, you have these gene editing tools, you have a good sample of DNA. How do you turn that into a wolf?
So you map them next to it, and there was a study that came out about, and once again, this goes back to the status quo of scientists. Of academic scientists. There was a paper that came out a few years ago because they didn't have much data. They said that direwolves weren't closer related to wolves. They were closely related to jackals. And that's because at the time, they only had 0.15% of the genome, right? They just didn't have all the data. That's not negative. They just didn't have all the data. Now we know that they actually were closely related to wolves because we have more data.
Which wolves?
Gray wolves, or the precursor to gray wolves, right? So they were closer to the wolf ancestry line in kind of the broader canid group and family group. And so what we found is, so once you do that, we start looking at all these genes and we start to understand where the difference is. And we start to see that in certain parts of the genome that are responsible for size, for muscle, for craniofacial, that there's differences, right? So we can start to map and say, okay, where are the differences between gray wolves and where are the differences between gray wolves and dire wolves? And then with those, we have a lot of different tools that we can then go use to make those changes from the dire wolves in a gray wolf cell line. And so, and then once you go through that process, we didn't talk about this earlier, you do the same process called somatic cell nuclear transfer, which is effectively cloning, where you take the nucleus of one cell, you put that into another egg cell, and then you take that embryo and you insert it into a surrogate.
It is that.
And is this a 100% dire wolf, or is this a new thing?
So this goes into the philosophical thing. Right. So if you look at speciation, right, there's basically, the scientists don't agree on how you classify a species. So you've got certain people that'll say, well, if a species is dictated by something that can't breed, that's literally a definition. If this animal can't breed with this animal, then that's its own species. Then you have other people, you have the paleontologists, and some of them love us, like Kenneth Lacavara, who's arguably the number one paleontologist in the world that loves us. But then you have other paleontologists who just hate us. And they do it based solely on tooth morphology, because they argue that's the only thing that is going to be persistent over time. And I asked a paleontologist recently that hates us. I said, if I made a mammoth with that was giant with pink curly fur and it had the right tooth morphology, you're saying that based on your scientific papers that you would say that's a mammoth. They're in an ecological preserve as well, and so, but you're gonna die when you hear what I went through on this. So I found out that we try to pair every de-extinction project with a species preservation project outside of making all.
All right, I'm gonna end the stream here, guys. Catch you again in another video. You guys just had to ruin it, honestly.